Hello, everybody. Good morning, everyone. What a blessing it is to be here, visiting a new place where we talk about spiritism, where we learn, where we try to always improve. I've never been to your center here, so it's a pleasure to meet every one of you. See some faces that I already know, but like meet new ones as well. It's amazing. And today's topic is one that was chosen by you guys, because I usually send a list of topics, and the directors or people in charge of the center usually pick the subject. So this one is about the silent strength, and I'm not gonna necessarily reveal it right away what the strength is. We all have this, like Marcelo said, this strength inside of us, but I'm not gonna reveal it right away. But it's something very, very specific. But to talk about the strength, first we need to talk about something that Spiritism, as the promised consoler, touches upon and explains in a way that I believe we've never seen before. No other set of beliefs, not to say religion, because it's not only religion, but no other set of beliefs can explain afflictions so well, such as Spiritism. Not only explain why they're there, what the types of afflictions, as well as why they're there. Why do we suffer? So first, let's talk about afflictions. And I usually like to leave the source material on the top right corner. So everybody, I'm always bringing different source materials for my talks, and I like to leave it there so people have a visual, and also afterwards people can read and say, hey, I like this. Let me go stop by the library, buy books, help the center, help yourself with knowledge as well. So this one comes from the Gospel according to Spiritism. We have an entire chapter dedicated to afflictions. Blessed are the afflicted is the name of the chapter, based on the Sermon of the Mount. Blessed, we have the different types of blessed or this, blessed or that. This one is blessed are the afflicted. He's going to talk about the justice of the afflictions, cause of the afflictions that could be either in this present life or in the past life. And this one he's going to say, in virtue of the axiom, and I like to leave the text also verbatim for us to study together and reflect together. In virtue of the axiom that every effect has a cause, these miseries that we suffer, we as humans suffer, are effects that must have a cause, and if one believes in a just God, then that cause must also be just. So the axiom, meaning this idea, this invariable idea, that if to every effect there must have been a cause, and that's why if there is an effect, there is a cause. So what is that cause? Why are we suffering? Well, we were all created by God. We were all created by a God that is infinitely just, fair, good, merciful, kind, all-loving. So why do we suffer? Because suffering doesn't feel good. So why do we suffer? And he's going to say, if there is a cause for this effect, because the suffering is the effect, and the cause is God, if we talk about a God that is fair, just, kind, infinite in all its perfections, then that cause must also be just. This idea, I think, is something that Spiritism brings so well and with such clarity that makes us start to really ponder, why am I suffering? Then why does this feel so bad? There must be a purpose. Once we shift those lens, there must be a purpose. We start to see things in a new light, because we start to see that the suffering, the affliction that we go through in life must have a purpose. And if that purpose is something that was created by God, like I was, then the purpose must be something just. Consequently, he's going to say here, since the cause always precedes the effect, so there's a cause and then there's the effect, not the other way around. And since the cause in this case cannot be found in present life, because he's talking about cause in past lives, then it must be prior to this life, that is belongs to previous existence. Meaning, if I'm suffering something right now, if I have an ailment, if I have something that is troubling me deeply in this life, and if I look at my life and I may say, wow, I'm only 37 years old, I've never done harm to anybody else, why am I having this suffering? Then he's saying, if it's not, the answer is not in this life, then it must be somewhere else. Where is that somewhere else? In a past life. So this is already bringing another concept of Spiritism that we talk about so much, which is the immortality of the soul. The immortality of the spirit. If the spirit was created by God, as we know in the Spirit's book, simple and ignorant, we had a beginning. We're not going to have an end because we're immortal. We're not eternal. God is eternal. There was no beginning, no end. We are immortal. That's a big difference. We were created by God, simple and ignorant, and we're going to have that march of progress through immortality, which is a concept that we can't even understand if we're honest about it. We can't even, if I ask you to imagine 2,000 years, nobody here can imagine what 2,000 years actually is. We know we have an idea, but we can't really necessarily comprehend what 2,000 years is. Imagine immortality forever and ever and ever. If I tell that Christ is older than Earth, billions and billions and billions of years old, we can't even imagine that. But what we can truly try to focus on here is this idea that we were created simple and ignorant. We lived different lives, because if I'm only 37 years old in this life and I'm suffering something that cannot be explained by the things I've done in this life, then there must be an explanation for that. Where is that? In a previous life. Because again, in this chapter he talks about afflictions, and the source of these afflictions or the cause of these afflictions being either something that I've done in this current life, or if it's not in this current life, we must look back and say, okay, so maybe this is a reflection of something that I've done in a past life. And that is fairness as well. That is justice from our God. Because otherwise, if I did a lot of bad things in a past life, and let's say, hey, all is forgiven, all is forgotten, don't worry about it. What about those people who do bad things and then you suffer? Where's the justice in that? We would have an unfair God. And God is not unfair. God is fair. So the cause is saying precedes the effect, and there's something about the afflictions that goes to our previous lives, but there are also the afflictions of things that we do in this current life. And we can even we can even bring this to a very understandable level, such as if I overeat. If I eat more food than my body can support, how am I going to feel? Great? No. I'm going to feel afflicted. I'm going to have an affliction, a bodily, affliction, but an affliction nonetheless, because that's the effect, and the cause was overeating, for instance. Just one example, very simple. And I can say, I'm not going to be feeling very bad after overeating and saying, oh, this is because I did something in my past life. No, nothing about your past life. It's because what you did an hour ago with a fork and a knife, for instance, right? So we understand that. You guys are laughing because it's very obvious, but sometimes there's these subtleties that we tend to forget, I think, and realize that there must be something there, and if it's not in this life, it's in a past life. In the Gospel, according to Spiritism, there's also, like I said, this specific chapter, Blessed are the Afflicted, talk about suffering. So why do some people suffer more than others? And I think, again, this is such the crux of the matter. This is such a key concept that Spiritism brings and explains and sheds a new light that we haven't had before. Welcome. Why do some people suffer more than others? And Kardec is going to say, well, if one believes in God, one cannot conceive of God apart from infinite perfection. Another concept that is so hard for us to grasp. Perfection. Something without flaws, any flaw whatsoever. God must be all-powerful, holy, just, and wholly good, meaning in its entirety. Otherwise, God would not be God. So if this being that created us favored me but didn't favor Flavio, where's the fairness in that? Oh no, but everybody else but Flavio is fine. Also, it's not a fair God, because it's 99.9999% fair. It's not 100% fair. It is wholly just, wholly good, wholly fair, infinite in all its perfection, in all its qualities. So, he's going to say, if God is supremely good and just, then God can neither act capriciously, like I was saying, nor with partiality. God cannot be partial. Therefore, the vicissitudes of life have a cause. Remember, effect having a cause first. And since God is just, this cause must also be just, even if the effect doesn't feel fair. Even if the affliction doesn't seem fair. That cause must be good and just, because it came from God. And if God created something for the sake of it, then something that's evil, God will not be good. Because why? How can something that's perfectly good too, create something that's a little bit of evil, tiny bit of evil that will stay evil forever? Capriciously, with partiality. Okay, this son of mine is going to be evil forever. Everybody else I'm going to create to be good. This one, no. It's not God. That's not the God that Spiritism brings to light. So then the justice of the afflictions, and like I said, this is something that I think Spiritism hits the nail on the head, because there must be a fair cause, and that shifts, like I said, shifts our lens. We change our lens through which we see the world, and through which we see our own afflictions and the own problems that we suffer daily sometimes, because we start to look at things and have a different understanding and find, and I'm going to get to that eventually, the silent strength that we all have within us, and we can practice that more. But the idea of the justice of the afflictions is key here, because we cannot talk about afflictions, we cannot talk about problems and suffering and pain if we don't first set the tone, if we lay the groundwork there to understand that these things that God creates are all good. They're all meant to be good. The imperfections and the pain that we suffer are because of our state of imperfection still, because of our state of purification that we're still marching to get there. It's not because we're meant to suffer forever. Nobody's meant to suffer forever. That's why Spiritism says there's no hell. Not in the way we've been taught. Maybe through different reincarnations as well, learning about hell. There's no eternal suffering. And for that, I'm going to recommend Heaven and Hell, the book by Allan Kardec. One of my favorite books by Allan Kardec, to be honest. It was also published on my birthday, which is funny. That's how I remember the date. August 1st, 1865. So it's interesting because the justice of the afflictions, therefore, like I said, lays the groundwork for us to understand pain, for us to understand afflictions and suffering, and start to realize that God did not favor me or you or any one of you guys and hates the person that is born in a war zone. Because how can we say that me right now in my life that's amazing in this country, with the way everything I have different opportunities as somebody who is born in a war zone, for instance. That's somebody right now born in the Middle East or born in Africa in extreme poverty. So am I going to look at that and say, well, did God favor me, not them? Why? So then God is not infinitely just, good, fair, kind, merciful. So there must be a reason for all these things. The good and the bad, because again, we oftentimes focus too much on the bad. But the good and the bad. We also have this idea that I wanted to bring as well about suffering. And I'm going to bring the book Living Spring, which is a book of messages, psychographed by Chico, welcome, by the spirit author Emmanuel. And I brought 3 different messages here, or at least like a little parts of a different message here, where we have first message 61. We have, as long as you are living on a plane of practice such as the earth, you will continue to be confronted with problems and suffering. And I bolded suffering there because, again, we're talking about afflictions, pain, suffering first. As long as you're living on a plane of practice such as the earth, you will continue to be confronted with problems and suffering. There is no life without pain. There is no life without suffering here. There is no life without disappointment here. Period. And I always say, if we try to live a life without pain, the first thing we're going to feel is pain from the disappointment that we're going to have pain. If I want to live without disappointment, the first thing I'm going to be is disappointed. So there is no such a thing. So if there's no such a thing, and this is the key piece here, accepting that, this acceptance piece, then it's saying, as long as I'm living in this plane such as the earth, which is, as we know through Spiritism, a world of trials and expiations, then I'm gonna continue to be confronted with problems and suffering. That's our condition right now. We were created simple and ignorant. We're evolving. We have been and will continue to evolve. But right now, in the state that we are in this planet of trials and expiations, moving to a planet of regeneration, and there's 2 after those still. So we're far from being without suffering. And that's okay, because then we need to understand that. And I think, again, Emmanuel here in this message 61, he's going to bring this knowledge to us, this idea that, hey, accept that. Deal with it. And we must do that. We must accept that. Each day has a lesson for us. That's another message, message 141. Each experience leaves behind its corresponding value. Each problem entails a determined objective. Each day has a lesson for us if we only stop to look at it and learn from that lesson. The pain, the afflictions that we sometimes suffer, like I said, maybe on a daily basis, they have a lesson. Everything has a lesson. Every experience leaves behind its corresponding value, because it's how we assign value to that. How are we dealing with that affliction? How are we dealing with that pain? How are we learning from that experience? Bad experience, because nobody likes to feel pain. But an experience nonetheless with its value. And that's what he's saying here. Each problem entails a determined objective. Everything has an objective. Effect, cause. Fair cause. Therefore, you have the effect. We got to look at the cause as well. Message 169. Let us remember that the inner man continues to be renewed. We are always evolving. We're always progressing. The struggle enriches it with experience. Pain purifies its emotions, and sacrifice tempers its characters. The suffering, the pain works such as the fire for the metal, the hard metal. The fire comes and then you can mold that metal. That's pain to our lives. Pain as the teacher, pain as this thing, this instrument that we need still to have in our lives in order to learn. There's a word that Emmanuel likes to use a lot, Joanna de Angelis too, called goads. Not with an L. G-O-A-D-S. Goad. That is a poking instrument that they use with the cattle when the cattle stops moving. So the farmer comes and pokes the cattle so the cattle continues to move. It's a poking instrument. It's almost like a big needle in a way. Goad. And Emmanuel says pain is the goad, because a lot of the times we stop. We don't want to go and we don't want to amend that mistake. We don't want to look into our pain and see what's happening there. How can we improve? We don't want to improve sometimes. So we try to stop. And then what does life do? Here's a pain for you. You're not taking care of your health. Here's something to make you look at your health and take better care of that. For instance, again, bringing into our lives. And that's a goad. G-O-A-D-S. Or in this case, without the S. But pain purifies its emotion. I think it is beautiful. And sacrifice temper its character. As we're all being renewed from the inside out, by the way, not from the outside in, from the inside out, pain and suffering helps build and mold that character. Because if you think about any person that comes to your mind that has lived a very, very fulfilling, enriching life from a spiritual perspective, guarantee you're going to find sacrifice there. Think of any saint you want to think of, any missionary, any medium, anybody you're going to think of. I guarantee you're going to find sacrifice in their lives. Guarantee you. Because what? Because they understood that. They embraced that. And then they sacrifice, they have the sacrifice, they accept the suffering. I mean, Chico Xavier had so many disorders, so many illnesses and ailments we can't even name. We would be complaining and whining every day, I'd say, if we had half of what he had. I know I would. If I have a cold, I'm already like, oh, this is terrible, like I feel terrible. Imagine having all that he had. But he understood that. He understood, and he still embraced the work. He still sacrificed, and he knew that suffering, that was temporary. The blindness, everything else he was suffering. This is one example. We can think of many others. We can even have examples in our own lives with people close to us that we know sacrifice so much to be able to understand and accept that pain. So therefore, I bring here something that I think is very visual, but it's very interesting. This art that I found, I don't know, 6 years ago, 7, 10 years ago, even more. These are the things we can do with our pain. Imagine the boulder there is the pain. Okay? So this is what, and then I put the question there, what can I do with my pain? There's a few options. I can suffer from my pain, meaning I can let the pain crush me and stay under the boulder there, just paralyzed, still, just suffering, complaining, and that pain is going to be there. Nothing's going to change it. I can drag it, and I really like how the artist created this. I can drag that pain, try to move that boulder, that pain with me, and drag that pain and still complain and still try to become a martyr, this and that, look at me, I'm in so much pain. I can analyze the pain as well. Here's the little guy with the hourglass trying to analyze, what is this boulder made of? What is this pain made of? What is this pain trying to teach me? What is this experience trying to teach me? I can learn from it, which is different than analyzing if you think about it, because for analyzing, I can simply analyze, I hate this, and complain still, right? But learning is different. Learning, he's sitting down, he's trying to understand what that pain actually means, what that pain actually entails, what that pain actually brings as far as a teaching moment to the person's life. And then I love this one. We can accept it, right? He's sitting there kind of like relaxing, accepting the pain. And this is a word, I have another talk on this, but this is a word that is very misunderstood, I think, accepting. People think that accepting is something terrible, like, oh, I'm not going to accept the pain. Well, yeah. If you want to deal with that, you're going to have to accept it that you have it first. I always say, for anybody who has a cancer diagnosis, the first thing you need to do is accept that you have the cancer. No, okay, but how can I not? Well, you can say, I don't believe in these tests. I don't have anything. That's not accepting. And then what's going to happen? Probably something not good, right? But with the cancer, again, I'm being extreme here, but with the cancer, the first thing you need to do is accept that you have it. So you accept that you have that. And then you go and you do something about it, which is the last one, transform it. And I like that it's a little heart. He changed the boulder into a heart. Because that's how we transform our pain. And that's how we can at least transform our pain. Maybe that's not something we often do, and we need to learn to do it more. But we can also transform that pain. And to me, I always say this when I show this, been showing this for years now in these talks, but like, I don't know if the person meant this as a sequence, but we can definitely see a sequence from here to there. Because first we may suffer from that pain, then we can drag that pain, then we can try to analyze the pain, then we can try to learn from the pain, and then we finally accept. And at last, we have the courage to transform our pain. And that has to do with our silent strength. Suffering now, this is Joanna De Angelis. I told you guys I like to bring different source materials for these talks. Suffering is a path to spiritual redemption in the face of the incomplete moral development of the individual. A path to spiritual redemption because we have not yet reached the point that we are spirits that are pure spirits, first order, first class. So suffering is that path. In the face of the incomplete moral development, a personal choice, it is a script devoid of any punitive action, educating or re-educating through the same mechanisms, thanks to which there was compromise, deviation from the route, disrespect for the laws of life. Its presence prevails while depuration is necessary. The presence of suffering prevails while depuration is necessary because, like I said, suffering, the pain, acts as an instrument for our own depuration. The void, and I love that she says this, look, this is really, really rich here. It is a script devoid of any punitive action. It's not that God is punishing me for the sake of punishment. No. Because if I think of an expiation that's imposed on me, or if I think of a trial, I am the one asking for that. So I may be the one asking for that specific suffering in my life, and I asked it before I reincarnated, to have that specific barrier in my life, so then I can practice something else. That's devoid of any punitive action. Educating, and I love that she says, or re-educating, because sometimes we don't learn the lesson. I may come with a certain, let's say, a certain affliction of the body because I need to learn a certain virtue, and then I don't learn that virtue, I squander that opportunity, then I'm going to get back in another life, get back here, maybe with that same thing. So re-educating. So educating and re-educating. That's why the re is there. Again, meaning again, re-educating through the same mechanisms. And that's what I said. The pain sometimes, the affliction that we choose is a mechanism. And she says, thanks to which there was compromise, deviation of the route, aka expiation. And Joanna has this great concept of trials and expiations. When she says expiations is any deviation from the route. So if I'm on the route of goodness and I make a dire mistake against a brother or a sister, I deviated from the route of goodness. So I need to come back to that route. This here is the expiation. Recalculating, amazing. That's the recalculating of life, is the expiation. And the presence is going to prevail while we still have the depuration process. Bringing you back to the gospel now. We have this spirit that says, pain is a blessing sent by God to all his elected. At first when we read this, if we're just reading by the sake of reading, this seems very contradictory. What are they talking about? Blessing? Who here feels pain and say, yes, I'm so blessed and I love feeling pain, right? But again, Spiritism invites us to go deeper into the meaning of things. She's going to say, so when you suffer, do not allow yourself to become afflicted. And here's they're making a distinction between suffering and affliction. Rather bless the omnipotent who, through the pain of this world, has chosen you to receive glory in heaven. Still using some of that vocab, because if you remember, the Gospel according to Spiritism, 1864. So we're talking almost 200 years ago. So heaven, hell, we still see these vocabs specifically in a lot of these books. But specifically this part here is telling us that when we receive the pain on this earth, we're being blessed with that opportunity to receive that pain so we can purify our soul and move on. And continue forward, because nobody was created to go backwards in life. We have something called the law of progress. So this here, I think, is the crux of the silent strength, because when we understand that all these things are temporary, that all these things that we must accept the pain in the way and transform that pain, transform that suffering, and not let, like they're saying here, not let the suffering become an affliction, which are two different things in this context. We start to understand how a lot of the trials and tribulations we suffer here in this life are necessary, and it's, thank God we're receiving them right now, because that means we can move on to the next step now of our own spiritual evolution, of our own spiritual path. So then we can move forward. And now, the silent strength, what is that? Resignation. Those who suffer greatly must tell themselves that they have much to expiate and should rejoice at being healed sooner. Thank God I'm going through this right now, because then I'm not going to have to go through it later. It depends on them through resignation. This is the silent strength, because resignation doesn't make any sound, doesn't make any noise. To make such suffering profitable and not to waste the fruit by complaining. This is the resignation. This is the silent strength. And why is it silent? Because that's something that when we're suffering, when we're accepting, when we're transforming our pain, a lot of the times is going to be invisible to others. It's going to be an internal battle, an internal achievement as well. When we are resigned and we're like, okay, now I have the same pain I had before, but now I'm not complaining so much. Now I'm trying to understand it differently. Now I'm actually changing the way I see life, the way I see things, and I'm taking this opportunity now to stop and really learn. Great. That's the silent strength. But people around you may not even notice that you're going through that. They're not going to have applause for being resigned. Again, think of anybody that did great things, morally speaking, and spiritually speaking in this world. Guarantee you're going to find resignation, but then the applause don't come for that. It's a silent strength, but it's a strength nonetheless. It's a power, we can even say, that we all have. But without resignation, they will have to start all over again. Why? Because we must go through different types of pain in order to purify ourselves. So therefore, if we're not resigned, if we go back to complaining, if we go back to dragging that pain as we saw before, suffering from it, we're going to have to start all over. If I face a pain that is unbearable in this life and I decide to end my life because of that pain, I'm going to have to recapitulate that pain. I'm going to have to recapitulate that suffering. But now it's aggravated, but that's another talk. But just so we understand, there's no escaping divine justice. There's no escaping divine justice. And we are all created to progress. If pain is necessary to progress, then what are we doing with our pain? Still in the book, The Gospel According to Spiritism, with the words, "Blessed are the afflicted, for they shall be consoled," Jesus indicates simultaneously the compensation that awaits those who suffer and the resignation that leads one to bless suffering as a prelude to healing. So prelude means something that comes before. Something that comes before the healing, the resignation. Because when we face that pain with resignation, with acceptance, with courage, then we start to heal. Then we can start to transform our pain, as we saw with the boulder. And that's the key turning point here. Because when Jesus said, "Blessed are the afflicted, for they shall be consoled," even from the same structure of the sentence, we can see, for they shall be consoled. They are not consoled in the same moment. They shall be consoled, or they will be consoled. Why? Because when they accept and they resign in face of that pain, they will find their consolation. And their consolation is what? Is looking back. Even one of the consolations is looking back and saying, I did better than I did before. I conquered that in myself. I changed for better. And now I don't have to go through that. Now I have other challenges that I can undertake as a spirit that's still evolving. But that one, I already won. Against myself, I surpassed that challenge. Isn't that a consolation? When we undergo something very hard, you can think of your work or personal life. When you're able to take on something that's very challenging, very hard, and you actually achieve that, it could be something personal too. I have trouble asking forgiveness. And when you ask for forgiveness, doesn't it feel great? You're like, I did better. Or when you accept somebody's asking for forgiveness, that's a big consolation, because you're like, okay, I already changed for better. So blessed are the afflicted, for they shall be consoled. It's so important to understand the verb tense here. For they shall be consoled. Jesus knew, of course, that we will have afflictions, but we will be consoled. Humans can either soften or increase the bitterness of their trials according to the manner in which they view earthly life. Their suffering is greater if they consider its duration to be long. Look at this. We can either increase or soften the pain, or soften the impact of that trial, depending on how we view earthly life. Our suffering is greater if we consider the duration to be long. Consequently, those who look at things from the standpoint of the spirit life understand corporeal existence at a glance. What is it? What are they trying to say here? Simply that whenever we are looking to life, we're looking at suffering, we're trying to practice our own resignation in face of that pain. We have to understand things from a spiritual perspective, from the life of the spirit, because otherwise we would have a very unfair God, and we would waver when we have the pain come to our lives. Imagine somebody who lives an entire life with some sort of, like I said, physical affliction. If they only think that there's only one life, what a terrible life. Why is it worth living even if we're only thinking of that? Again, I'm being extreme for us to understand. That's why we need to look at things with the lens of the Spirit. This is only a grain of sand in a full coast of the beach in terms of the life of the Spirit. All the lives that we have right now, everything we have right now, it's only what? decades, a few decades longer we're going to be here in this material body. So if this material body is rotten, if this material body is having that pain that is going to purify the spirit, because the body is an instrument and a vehicle to the spirit, then I change my view on how I can face suffering, how I can understand suffering. Because if I only think, I only live once, I do have a soul, but I only have one life, never going to live again. After this is either heaven or hell or purgatory, which is also bad. Then what's the point of looking at my life? How am I going to learn from the suffering? I'm not going to learn anything from the suffering. I'm going to think that everything happens by accident, that there was a mistake that was made against me, and I'm going to live a life with bitterness. And that's why they're saying here that suffering is going to be even longer if we have that sort of materialistic view of life in general. But when we have the spirit lens on, we understand that this too shall pass. That's where resignation comes from. This too shall pass. So I'm going to understand this. I'm going to do my best to stay strong and stay firm in my purpose, because this too shall pass. And once this passes, that's it. It's in the review mirror, because if I had to undergo sufferings unnecessarily, where is the fair God in that? That's making me go through the same lesson that I already learned. Who in here has gone to school, has graduated high school, but now you're having to go back to 5th grade to learn again, to sit down in a classroom for an entire year? Nobody. Everybody would be like, no, it's like, I've already learned this. Why am I here doing this? Same thing with God. And if we have our flawed view of the world, of our educational system, imagine God that is perfect. There is no unfairness. So when we look at things from a spirit lens, the life of the spirit, everything changes. Our perspective changes. And then the suffering becomes shorter as well in terms of its duration. Because I understand that I have had many lives before, I'm going to have many lives after, and this is just, like I said, a grain of sand in a whole coastal life of the spirit. Moreover, the burden is proportional to the strength, just as the reward will be proportional to the resignation and courage. Who said this was Lacordaire. The reward will be greater than the affliction is painful. However, one must merit that reward. And that is why life is full of tribulations. Nothing is given freely. I'm going to say this for the 10th time. God is fair. If he was to give me things freely, then where's the fairness in those who he did not give freely to? So therefore, the burden is proportional to the strength, because God is fair. Whenever I'm undergoing any sort of tribulation, any sort of challenge, and I want to try my resignation, I have to remember this: God would not give me anything that I cannot withstand. I would not have any weight that I cannot carry, because where is the perfection in that being that knows that I can't carry and is still giving me that? There's no perfection. That's the answer. Therefore, it's not God. So there must be that understanding there. Because if I have that problem, I understand that the burden is proportional to the strength. And the reward will be proportional as well. So if me and the person right next to me are both similarly on the same trajectory of the spirit, let's say similar, because of course each path is unique, and we're facing that same trial, and I deviate completely, complain, I have a lot of blasphemy against God, and the other person has resignation, their reward will be greater than mine, because I haven't learned a lesson yet. So the reward will be greater, but this is the beautiful part of this all. The reward will be greater than the affliction is painful. So whatever pain you may be facing or have faced before, know that with the resignation, the reward is even greater than the pain that you suffered. However, it's almost an obvious, statement here, but it's so important. One must merit that reward. Nobody's going to be resigned by me or for me. Nobody's going to do that for me so I can get the reward. I'm not going to reap the reward if my wife is being resigned and I'm not. Oh, well, she was. So we're both resigned now. Good. Next chapter. No, I have to be resigned myself. I have to merit that reward. And that's why life is full of tribulations. This is what the Spirit is saying here. I also bring Leon Denis, one of my favorite authors of all time. This book, The Problem of Life and Destiny. He's going to say, freedom or liberty is a necessary condition of the human soul, which without it could not construct its destiny. Why is this important for resignation? Because resignation, or practicing resignation, is a choice. It's a conscious choice that we must make. To accept that pain, to transform that pain, to resign. That's why freedom is a necessary condition, because how can I construct my destiny through my merits or rewards based on what I've done if I don't have the will to choose? If I don't have the ability to choose. So the silent strength that we all have within us, because we're not in a primitive planet, we're here already. We have some resignation. Some may have a lot, some may have less, but we all have that. So to practice the silent strength, we must understand that we do have the choice. Therefore, let us rise. This is an invitation from Leon Denis. Let us rise to the conscience of our true role and goal, and we will be free. Let us fashion truly free souls, freed from the chains of fate. Why? Because Leon Denis speaks here, again, in a time, for those who don't know, he became kind of like similar to Kardec, but a few years later. And he's one of the greatest writers of Spiritism, especially in its infancy. And he's saying here, because there's a lot of, when he talks about chains of fate, he's talking about fatalism that exists in a lot of religions. Like I said, you either go to heaven or hell, you're either going to be punished forever or reap forever, like it rewards forever. So he's saying, we are free souls. We are free spirits. We have this freedom of choice, and then our consequences will be based on our choices, on our actions. So understanding that, we can practice the silent strength. And in another book that's great about him, after death, after death, he's going to say that suffering is the law of our world. It is a duty to fight against adversity. Pain in its many forms is the ultimate remedy for imperfections, for the illnesses of the soul. Pain, a lot of the times, of the body is the remedy for the sick soul. So that is something very key for us to understand. Once again, the body is the material instrument, the vehicle that the spirit utilizes to travel through its own journey. Sometimes that body will need to come a certain way or have a certain affliction in order to heal the spirit that is the actual sick elements there. Not the body. The body is temporarily sick because the body, guess what? It's going to go back there. A couple of decades later, it's going to be back there. The spirit will live on. The spirit will remain. So again, when we look at that, everything changes, because then, okay, what is this thing that I have right now only for a decade? My spirit's going to continue so much longer after this. So he's saying here that pain in its many forms, and I like that he put that in its many forms, because the sentence would have the same meaning if he just said pain is the ultimate remedy. But I like that he put in its many forms, because pain can come in many forms. It's not always the obvious ones that we see somebody with a physical pain or a biological diagnosis that afflicts pain. A lot of the times the pain is in here and we don't see that. Or the pain is in here and we don't see that. That's why he's saying the pain in its many forms. The afflictions can come in many forms, and we don't have resignation if we don't have this. That's why I wanted to put faith there as well, because faith and resignation go hand in hand. Why? Because I need to have faith that I'm going to live on. I need to have faith that I am an immortal spirit and I have a body right now. I'm not a body with a soul. I'm a soul with a body. That's very different. When I have faith in those things, I can face the challenges that life throws at me much differently. When I have faith in God's will, when I have faith that everything comes from a fair God. Now the Spirit's book, 1857, question 663. Can we, by praying for ourselves, avert our trials or change their nature? We talk about the power of prayer. Can we change them or avert their nature? Your trials are in the hands of God, and there are some of them that must be undergone to the very end. But God always takes account of the resignation with which they are born. And I brought this because here's the word again, the silent strength right there, resignation. So God will take into account the resignation in which this suffering is born, this trial is born. When we pray, a lot of things happen. And this is another talk as well. I'm not going to dive too much into that. But prayer is a great instrument as well. It's a great vehicle. It's a great method as well. But if I need to undergo through something, doesn't matter how much I pray, that's not going to go away. And that's another mistake we have too, to pray that just remove that. Please just remove this from me. Just remove this boulder that's on my shoulder. I don't want it. And I'm praying fervently. And I'm coming to the Spiritist Center. People are praying for me and they're still there. Like, where's God? I'm praying. Can't you hear? We pray wrong. We pray very, very in the wrong way. We need to pray for more resignation, not for the problems to just go away. We need to pray for more acceptance, for more faith even. Not for the problems to go away. Because if we need to go through something, guess what? We're going to go through that something. And now, Emmanuel, I said, many different sources for you guys to have plenty of things to think about. Christ began his divine mission among peasants. He lived among irascible doctors of the law and rebellious sinners. He associated with the sick and the afflicted. He ate the hard bread of humble fishermen and finished up his holy work between two thieves. What are you hoping for? That's it. I feel like the message could end right here. What are we waiting? What are we hoping for? If Christ, being Christ, this is what he went through, what am I hoping for? If you're waiting for an easy life and situations of prominence in the world, remember the Master and think a little. This is actually the name of the message. It's message number 2. Think about this, message number 2 of this book. It's called Think a Little. Remember the Master and think a little. How did the Master went through a lot of the sufferings that we saw him undergo through? With resignation. Sometimes with silence when silence was needed. Sometimes with firmness when firmness with love was needed. But he resigned. He resigned. And that's another word that I like to say, acceptance and resignation. People have the misconception that resignation is surrendering. Or passivity. Like acceptance. Oh, I'm just passively accepting. Absolutely not. Acceptance is something that's very active. Resignation is an active movement of the spirit, of the soul, toward its own healing. That's resignation. That's why it's the silent strength. Because it's something that you're going to do it, people are not going to see, and that's okay. But in the end, it's not between you and others. It's between you and God. And the conscience, our conscience. Because where are the laws of God written? In our conscience. If I look at my conscience and I say, I did my best there. I truly acted in the best way possible that I could. The results were not as expected, but I did the best I could. Even if people around me are saying you should have done this, should have done that. But in my conscience, if I'm searching for my conscience and searching in my conscience, that's it. I did the best there. That's the answer that I need. So I brought here, I wanted to bring something practical, as I usually like to do with these talks, to bring something applicable, which is also, one of the things that I love about Spiritism. I always say this, whenever I'm doing these talks, whenever I'm disseminating Spiritism, I always like to bring something applicable, something practical for us, including my, here's the invitation, because I don't know most of you, so here's an invitation to, if you want to dive into more of some of these things, these applicable things that I'm mentioning, I do have a podcast on Spotify and YouTube that I invite you guys to check it out. It's called, in English and in Portuguese, I have both. Spiritist Companion in English, YouTube and Spotify, and I can show you afterwards. And in Portuguese, it's Companheiro Espírita. It's on Instagram as well. And I do weekly episodes. Why am I saying this? Because I do weekly episodes, 12 to 15 minutes of like short things with a piano in the background, more like a reflection of a topic. And I always try to bring an applicable component to that. I always try to bring an applicable moment so we can take that knowledge and apply it to our lives. So again, here's my invitation to you guys to check it out if you want. And today, since you're here, I wanted to bring something for you guys. So I brought a 3-minute resignation practice. Here's what we're gonna do. I mean, we don't have to do it now because I don't think we have time. Do we have time? Huh? Yeah. Yes? Okay, so maybe let's do it now. Okay? If you don't feel comfortable doing it, that's okay. You don't have to do it. I mean, the first one, you're already doing it, so good job. I'm gonna do a 1 to 2 minute, but it's just a practice for us. Again, if you don't feel like doing it, that's okay. But if you do, let's go. So you're gonna sit quietly. Then you're gonna inhale a couple of times deeply. And exhale slowly. Through the mouth. A couple more times. Slowly, hold a little. Exhale through the mouth as if you're blowing through a straw. You can close your eyes if you want. I usually prefer to close my eyes. And then you're gonna say, in your own minds, Lord, guide me. Lord, provide me guidance. As you're breathing deeply still. And then you're going to think of something that you're going through, a pain, a suffering in your life, an affliction. And in that situation, you're going to identify what you cannot control in that situation. You're going to identify the element of that situation that you cannot control. Now you're going to surrender to the will of God. You're going to understand that you cannot control that. And you're going to try to accept in your mind that there is that element that you can't control. As you continue to breathe deeply, inhaling and exhaling, in that same situation, you're going to identify what it is that you can actually do about it. What's within your reach, what's under your control to do. Take a few more deep breaths. And now you're going to vouch to yourself to try your best to do what you can actually control about that situation. What's actually within your reach. Silently, you're going to make a commitment to yourself, to your own conscience, that you're going to try to change the thing that you can change and accept the thing that you cannot. Take a few more deep breaths. And now you can open your eyes. And you can also say this mentally too. Remembering that this has everything to do with resignation, because we understand through resignation that in the end it's not our will that prevails, it's His will. So let thy will be done. And may His peace be with us always. Thank you so much.